Okay, welcome. Masechta Bava Kama. Today, this morning, Daf Pei Daled Amud Aleph. We'll get to Beis Hashem Daf Pei Daled Amud Beis. We are continuing the Perek of Achoivel, the Perek which is dealing with a person afflicting a wound on his fellow friend, which we established in many different ways. That at the end of the day, the chiyuv is a chiyuv mammon to pay monetary recompensation and not literally taking out the eye. And then we got to a story which will start from the bottom of the page of Daf Pei Daled Amud Aleph, starting Hahu Tura. There was a certain Tura, a certain shore, the Olas Yodei de Yanuka, that he bit off the arm of a child. And now, obviously, the owner of that shore was negligent, was Pisheya, and therefore he's chayav to pay Nezikin, the amount of the damage that he did to the child. What did I say is obvious? Oh, because otherwise the whole question over here is how much does he have to pay? So there's obviously an owner of the shore that was negligent. If he wasn't negligent, he wouldn't have to pay. So he was negligent, it was Peshay in his shore, and the shore went and bit off the hand of the child, and they came before Asa Lekameid the Rava. The case came before Rava, Omalahu, and Rava told him, Zilu Shaimuhu Ka'avdo. Go and make an evaluation of this child as if he would be an eved. How much would he be sold before the arm was bitten off and after the arm was bitten off? And that's you should pay. This is what we started yesterday, but it's not so simple that we can enforce payment in Bavel. Why is that? Because Rava himself said, you, master, said, Rava, you yourself said that anybody who is evaluated like an eved, we don't collect in Bavel. That we will explain immediately why not, but that's what Rava said. So the Gemara is asking, how could it be that you, Rava, paskin, that he has to pay? Amalahu, loy tzricha to eat tofas. The answer is that Rava never really meant to say that he was obligating the mazik, the choiva, to pay. He meant to say, let's do an evaluation of the nezek in a case of tfisa. As we spoke out yesterday, the Dayanim have got certain cases where they haven't got the koyach or the rights to enforce the payment. However, the chiyuv still does exist. The person's still liable to pay, but just they can't force in the Dayanim. But the nafkamina of that is if the damaged party manages to grab some money, or maybe even the object, maybe even the shore of the choivel, then he's allowed to keep it by him as recompensation for the damage. That's why Rava was saying to go and evaluate the damage, because in the case of tfisa, we need to know how much the damage was, even though we can't force the payment according to the judges can't force the payment. However, if it's tfisa, there will be tfisa. Now the Gemara is going to explain why is it exactly Rava said that you cannot collect these amounts of money in Bavel.
As compensation or as payment? They're two different things.
Oh, so maybe I don't know what's the difference. Compensation and payment, what's the difference?
Compensation. There's a kanas. You have to use the Hebrew terms, otherwise it's too ambiguous.
Here we're not talking about kanas over here. Maybe or not, we are in a minute about to speak about kanas, but all these payments, they're not a kanas, they are compensation. They're compensation. Compensation meaning you damage a certain amount, that much you should compensate for.
So if he takes 10 shekels from his cash, then is that full payment?
If the damage was 10 shekels, then yeah. So now the Gemara says, Rava l'taimei. This is Rava going according to what he said. The Amar Rava said this interesting statement, which we're going to dissect within a few lines of Gemara. Nizkei shor b'shor, v'nizkei shor ba'odom, goyivin oisoi b'babel. When a shore is the damaged party, we spoke, as Alan said correctly yesterday, shore over here is lav davka a shore, it's any animal, or maybe even any object that's damaged. The point is that it was an object, not a person that was damaged. If a shore, a behemoth, chayav, or oiv is damaged either by another shore or by a person, such payment is collected in Bavel. And the judges will come and enforce that there is payment to compensate for the shore. However, nizke odom ba'odom, Nizke Adam b'shor, if a person is damaged either through another person or through a shore, ain goyven oisei b'babel. That we are not collecting. The Dayanim do not enforce that collection in Bavel. So the bottom line difference is between the damaged party. If the damaged party is a shore or an animal or an object, you collect that in Bavel. and if it's a person who do not collect that in Bovel. Now the Gemara is going to say, why not? What's going on over here? What is actually? Yeah,
They did.
yes, correct. In Eretz Yisrael they did. Why? We're going to see right now why. What's so special about Bovel or anywhere in Chutz LaAretz for that matter? The Gemara says, "Ma'ishna nizke adam ba'adam v'nizke adam b'shor deloi." Why is it that suddenly, we're saying in Bava Kama that the judges don't enforce payment? Why not? When a person's damaged, why not? The Gemara says, "Elohim be'inan." We require judges. This is a parasha in Parashas Mishpatim. I brought the Chumash over here. In Parashas Mishpatim, it says that a lot of the dinim of Bava Kama and a lot of the Masechtas that in Yeshiva found in Parashas Mishpatim, it's full of all of Nezikin, a lot of things. So within the parasha over here, it says, while it's talking about, could be talking about a shomer looking after the object, but it's within the parasha of Shor and all Nezikim. It says, "Al kol davar pesha al Shor al Chamor al Sel Salma al kol aveda sheyom aki huzeh ad ha'elehim yavoi davar shneihem." To the judges, their dispute between the two people should come. So over him, the Elohim over here is referring to the Dayanim. And the Dayanim, in the Torah's eyes, is our Dayanim, which are Dayanim Smuchim. We started this yesterday. This is very, very important halacha. It's not the smicha we have nowadays. Dayanim Smuchim, in terms of the Gemara, was from Moshe Rabbeinu to Yoshua, and he gave him a certain reshus to be a Dayan, to paskin. He gave him a certain authority to paskin the laws and different monetary issues and things. And that carried on from generation to generation, from Rav to Talmud, till a certain tkufa in time when it stopped. Anyway, in any event, smicha only took place in Eretz Yisrael. You couldn't do smicha in Bovel, in Chutz LaAretz. This transmitting of the koyach to be a judge and the reshus to be a dayan was only in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, in Bovel they were basically lacking Dayanim Smuchim, it properly ordained Dayanim they didn't have. And therefore, you haven't got you haven't got Elokim, what the Torah calls Dayanim. When the Torah is discussing all these cases, you need these Dayanim. These are the authority you need to go to. And if you're missing them, then they can't enforce the law. So therefore, that's why the Gemara wants to say that Niske Adam ba'Adam, you do not judge in Bovel because you need to have Dayanim Smuchim, and you do not have that. That's why when a person is damaged, you cannot enforce collection of the money. But the Gemara says straight away, that's very nice. The Nizke Shor b'Shor ba'Adam Nami. Now we're just turning over the page. Elohim be'inan, the top of page Aladam and base. What's the difference? If you need these Dayanim Smuchim in order to be able to force collection of the money, why are you rather making a difference whether or not the damaged party was a person or whether the damaged party was a shor or a behemoth? In both cases, seemingly you should need Smuchim. As Rashi put Dayanim Smuchim, or proper ordained Dayanim. Rashi points out that the psukim over here that say Elohim, that you need Dayanim, is referring to all of these cases, whether a person is damaged or whether the shore is damaged. So therefore, you should always require Dayanim Smuchim. So why is it that we can collect actually when a shore is damaged? You should also need Smuchim. The Gemara says, Elamai shna shor b'shor ba'adam, the shlichusayu ka'avdina. This is a new concept over here, that there's a concept that the judges in Bovel could actually do the shlichus of the judges in Eretz Yisrael. Rashi in another place explains that the Dayanim in Eretz Yisrael gave a reshus. In certain cases, that's what we're going to see right now. In certain cases, the judges of Eretz Yisrael who were smukim gave reshus to the Dayanim in Bovel to judge these cases. It says the Gemara, Midi dehavi ahoidois v'halvois. This is comparable to hoidois and halvois, hoda'ah and halva'ah. Hoda'ah and halva'ah. We'll start with halva'ah. Anybody knows what a halva'ah is? Alone. Halva'ah is a loan. If you have Eidim on a loan, then the Malva can come and collect the loan. But really, that also should require Dayanim Smuchim. And or really, if a loiva refuses to pay, the Ikka din should be that the Malva has to go to Dayanim Smuchim to force the loiva to pay. But in this case, we actually make it. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says a principle called Shaloi Tinoil Deles Bifnei Loivin. We don't want people to stop giving a loan. Imagine if the halacha was, if you gave a loan, only Dayanim ordained Smuchim could collect the money. It's not always so easy to find Dayanim Smuchim in Bovel. They wouldn't be able to collect loans. They wouldn't be able to collect loans in a lot of places. So therefore, originally the Rabbanon were maker in these cases in order to prevent people from stop giving loans. It's actually quite similar to the example of Prusbol, as we know. Prusbol is going to come up in the end of Shemitah. And, and what's the principle of Prusbol? We know that Shemitah actually cancels out loans that are going to be the end of the Shemitah year, actually. The Sof Shnasa Shemitah, 1 millisecond before Rosh Hashanah is going to come in this year. Any loans that are outstanding are going to be cancelled. But if you Hillel Azakin stood up and saw people were going to stop giving loans, and that's a problem. We don't want a matziv. They're also going to be over Isurim. We don't want a situation where people are going to not give the loans. So they made a proof that the loan shouldn't get cancelled. Similar thing over here. They were makel in order to allow people to collect their loans. Otherwise, people would stop giving loans. So therefore, they allowed regular dayanim, meaning dayanim that are not necessarily smuchim, regular dayanim, even dayanim in Chutz LaAretz and other places, to collect halvaot. That's halvaot. Hoidois is a similar thing. It basically means not necessarily there might have been a loan or there's no shtar, but there are aidim that this person admitted he owes somebody else money. In terms of, there were two aidim. Reuben stood up and he said, "I owe Shimon money for whatever reason. Either he maybe borrowed it from him, maybe he gave him for whatever reason he did some work for him. He admitted in front of aidim, and that's a thing that we will make in order to collect that money, that you do not need Dayanim Smuchim. In any event, what the Gemara is suggesting is that when a shore gets damaged, we should be able to use the principle of Shlichus Sayu Ka'avdino. We're doing the Shlichus of the Dayanim in Eretz Yisrael. And just like the Eretz Yisrael Dayanim can do it, they gave Rishus to the Dayanim in Chutz LaAretz who do not have Smicha to judge these cases of when a shore gets damaged. That's Nizke Shor Ba'odom or Nizke Shor B'Shor. When a shore gets damaged, we can judge it with Dayanim that are not Smuchim, just like Hoidois and Halvois. We will make it in these cases to allow the din to be paskined by judges that are not Smuchim. But then the Gemara is still bothered by the question, so still, what's the difference? Adam, at the end of the third line, Adam b'Shor Nami Shlichusayu Ka'avdina. Midita Havi Ahoidois V'Alvois. So when a person is damaged, say the exact same thing. Let's say that we're doing the Shlichus of the Dayanim in Eretz Yisrael, and even though we're not Dayanim Smuchim, they should be able to judge the case. Bottom line is, again, the Gemara is just going backwards and forwards to say there's no real difference whether a shore gets damaged or whether a person gets damaged. In either case, even though me'ikar then you should require Dayanim Smuchim, but we have this principle of called Shlichus Saya. We're doing the Shlichus of the Dayanim Smuchim, just like we find by Hoidois and Halvois for a loan that we judge the case based on Dayanim that are not Smuchim. So too, we should be able to judge these cases of Nizikim, whether it's a shore that was Nizak or a person that was Nizak. So we're still holding at a point we don't understand the difference between this case Shor Adam and this case Adam Shor. Any questions still here? We're okay. So the Gemara says no. The Gemara says it's not so simple that we're always going to do the shlichus. There are certain conditions that are going to be involved. Says the Gemara, Amri ki ka avdinan shlichusayu. The Gemara is going to go backwards and forwards over here. We're going to see when do we do their shlichus b'midi de kim lon v'gavon, in a certain thing which is a fixed amount. It doesn't require necessarily an evaluation. A fixed amount is more simple to do. That we will say we'll do the shlichus of the Dayanim, and we can say that even Dayanim she'einam smuchim can judge the case. The midi deloi kimlon begava, a thing which is not so fixed and not so kavua, it rather needs an evaluation. Loi avdin shlichusai. For those kind of things, we do not have the reshus, so we cannot do the shlichus of the Bnei Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, the Gemara is saying when a person is damaged, we know the way to evaluate that is by looking at him on the slave market. And you make an evaluation of him on the slave market. How much was he worth before the injury and how much was he worth after the injury? Such a thing requires an estimation and evaluation. And that much, the Dayanim that are not Smuchim do not have the right to do not have the shlichus to do such a thing. Like Hoidois and Halvois for making a loan, then that wasn't a thing that required an evaluation. A person, Reuben owes Shimon 50,000 shekels. That doesn't require an evaluation. It's very clear. 50,000 shekels, that's the amount the loan is. Whereas when it comes to damages of a person, you have to evaluate it by the slave market. That's not such a simple thing to do. For that, the Dayanim she'einam smuchim do not have the rishus to do. But the Gemara says, Amri shor b'shor ba'adam nami loy kimlan begava. Actually, when a shore gets damaged, the Gemara wants to argue, it's also not so clear exactly how much the damage was, and you have to do some sort of evaluation, an assessment. How much was the damaged party of the shore was? So how can they do that? Why does Rava say that a shore gets damaged, you can collect it? Ella, what do we have to say? Puk chazi, heichim is damne tura b'shuka. Just go and have a look at what the market value is, what's the going rate, on eBay or whatever it is, for a short. Go and see how much it is. It's not so hard to do. Go see how much it is. If that's true, the Gemara argues, Adam b'shor nami. Puk chazi heichim mizdamni. Avda b'shuka. Go and see how much an eved is worth in the shuk. It's not at the end of the day such a hard thing to do. Make an evaluation. Just like by shore, you have to go and see how much the shore is in the shuk. So to an eved, you have to go and see how much the eved is in the shuk. It's not so complicated. It's not the end of the world. Make the evaluation, and we should be able to say that they should be able to judge the case. Even Dayanim Smuchim, the Gemara is still understanding, should be able to judge all cases, like at least these kind of cases in Bavel, just like a loan and just like an admission, halvois for hidois, just like over there we're makel when we say that Dayanim Smuchim can do it, so too we should be able to make it and say when the shore is damaged or when a person is damaged. In either event, the Dayanim Smuchim should be able to do it. Bob, did you have a question? Oh, yeah. This is the preliminary stages of what's going to be. Yeah.
Why does the Gemara always go to an evet evaluation? Why isn't it a sofa or a blacksmith or something like that? Because an evet is the lowest of the low. Why was the Gemara always give valuation of an evet?
Right. That's a good.
So you buy an evidence. There's a cash value there. So I mean, what's the evidence that's going to say on this a sofer or a doctor or a shomer keshuim? The marketplace will establish a value. A free man doesn't have a value. It's like before, human beings have infinite value. Only a slave is able to figure out the value.
Right. But a slave is yeah. No, it's true that, but that's a lot. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. The Rosh speaks out actually that there's an interesting point. The Rosh says at least you don't evaluate him as an Eved Ivri, because an Eved Ivri sold only for 6 years, and then you're right. We actually evaluate him, says the Rosh, in any event as an Eved Kanaini who doesn't go free at all, and that would end up being more because it's a one-time payment, but it's a lot. It's how much would you buy this person's work fee for the rest of his life? Ends up, being a lot of money. But as Rabbi Simkin said correctly, Eved is a way of giving a person a value, and an Eved blacksmith will be worth more than an Eved who's just a garbage truck worker or something. So the value is included, but the Eved is the way to give him a value. I think that will be the answer. So we're holding at a point where it's not clear why Dayanim She'inam Smuchim, they're not Smuchim, not ordained rabbis directly from Moshe Rabbeinu downwards, cannot judge these cases. So the Gemara wanted to suggest an answer because it needs an evaluation. The Gemara said, but the Shor also needs an evaluation. The Gemara says also another question on that answer. V'oi tashlum kefel, tashlum arba v'chamisha. You just finished Perek Meruba with Rabbi Teichtel, and you learned a lot over there about kefel and about Dalet v'hei. Anybody wants to fill in what's the chi of kefel and Dalet v'hei? When do you pay kefel? When you're a ganav, correct? Parrot says when you're a ganav, not a gazna. When you're a ganav, you pay kefel and Dalet v'hei. Shor v'seh. What happens with the shor v'seh? When you shecht it or sell it. Good. I'll give Rabbi Teichtel a good report. So basically, kefel and Dalet v'hei are things that we do not collect. We actually do not collect in Bavel, as we'll see in a minute. The Gemara is asking why not. If the reason was that we don't collect these things because they need an evaluation, kefel and Dalet v'hei also do not need so much of an evaluation, because if you stole a book which is worth something in the shop, then pay double the amount or 4 or 5 times the amount. That doesn't require such an evaluation. So why aren't we collecting these amounts? So that's what the Gemara says. Sorry, kefel v'tashlum ma'arvanish the kaitzi navat shlichusayim. We should be able to do the shlichus for these amounts because they are fixed amounts. Now the Gemara comes up with a new answer. I think Bapashtas, the Gemara is leaving this answer to the evaluation business. That's not the answer anymore. We need to come up with a new determining factor when we say shlichusayim and when we don't say shlichusayim. Just to clarify, shlichusayim means that in Eretz Yisrael we have Dayanim Smuchim. In Chutz LaAretz we're missing Dayanim Smuchim because in Chutz LaAretz you're not allowed to make smicha, you're not allowed to do smicha, so they didn't have the Dayanim Smuchim over there. And the question is, what right do Dayanim that are not Smuchim have to judge cases? We know they can do halvois for hidois, means loans they can enforce. Especially the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us because we were makel that people shouldn't stop giving a loan. We want to know if the same principle should apply, says the Gemara, to chavolis and nezikim. When a shore is damaged or when a person is damaged, we should also allow, say, the principle of shlichus in order to allow the Dayanim Smuchim to judge the cases. The Gemara says another condition. Ki ka'avdinan shlichusayu. It's about 10 or 12 lines from the top. When do we do shlichus? B'mamoina. We do shlichus b'mamoina. When it's a mandatory payment, this is what we spoke about a little bit before. Baruch and Alan, we mentioned about mammon and knas. We do shlichus when there is a mandatory payment. But knasa loy avdinan shlichusai. When it comes to knasais, we do not do shlichusai. Anybody can give an example of a knas? Kefil. Kefil is one. Shlosh Mishal Eved, good. If a shore is Makkah Shlosh Mishal Eved, is a knas, good. Yeah. Daled Vehei is also a knas. Oinus Umafata is a knas. Yeah, correct. Good. That's quite a few good examples of a knas. Whereas mandatory payment are like loans and the zikin, things like that. The Gemara say knasses we do not do in Bavel. Knasses loy abdin shlichusayu. That's the thing that we do not do, but mammon we will do. So that answers a little bit of the questions of why we don't do kefil and dalet vehei in Bavel. Those are knasses, and for that we don't do shlichusayu. But the question is that doesn't really help us very much over here, because shor v'shor and shor ba'adam and adam v'shor and adam ba'adam, these are all mammon. These are all mandatory payments. So that's what the Gemara asked straight away. Adam ba'adam d'mamoinuhu na'avit shlichusayu. Adam ba'adam is mammon. When a person damages another person, or a person damaged by a shor also, that's a mandatory payment. And why did Rava say that when an adam, if you remember the klal of Rava was if a shor is damaged, you can collect in Bavel. If a person's damaged, you cannot collect in Bavel. So now we understand if a shore is damaged, you collect in Bavel, because that's mammon. And we just said that by mammon, not knas, but by mammon we do shlichus. But adam is also mammon. If an adam is damaged, it's also a payment of mammon. Why are we not doing the shlichus in Bavel? So the Gemara adds in another condition. It's going to be the maskon. It's going to be two more conditions. We'll see. Ki ka'avdinan shlichusayu, but milsa the shchicha. We do milsa shlichusayu with things that are shchicha, meaning common, matsui, things that are common and regularly happen, not a rare occurrence. Things that are common we'll do the shlichus for. However, adam ba'adam, the loy shchicha, for a person to inflict a wound on another person, loy avdinan shlichusai. That is not common. I think similarly, a shor with adam is also not common. Therefore, when an adam is the victim, that's not such a common case to deal with. The Gemara says it's not so common, and not a common thing. We do not do shlichus of the Dayanim Smuchim in Eretz Yisrael. Whereas a shore that gets damaged, that seems to be more common. It seems to be more common for a shore to be damaged. Therefore, when a shore is damaged either by a person or by another shore, we say that we do the shlichus, and the Dayanim in Bavel can collect it. That's why Rava said we collect the money. Whereas when a person is the victim, that's not shchiach, that's not so common, and we do not do the shlichus for that. So at this point in time, we understand. Let's just do 1 second the recap. This whole Gemara started with a story about the shore which chew the arm of the baby, and the Rava said on that really we do not collect it. We shouldn't collect it. Only if there was tfisa, it was allowed to collect it. But you don't collect it. That's because that's not such a common case. For a person to be to be the damaged party, that's not so common. And so what? That it's not common. If it's not common, we say that we do not do the shlichus of the Dayanim Smuchim in Eretz Yisrael. This could be to do with the principle that if you've heard it before, milsa de lo shchicha loy tokun rabbanon. Rabbanon don't make takonas and special gezeiras and things in cases that are not very common. So kinireh that maybe that's got a shaykhus over here. These events that are not common, we're not makel to say that they've got the koyach to do the shlichus of the Dayanim in Eretz Yisrael. Fine. Then so at this point in time, let's just recap. If it's a knas, we don't do the shlichus. That's the thing that we do not collect in Bavel. If it's mammon, we could do the shlichus with the condition that it's a common kind of damage that took place. It has to be mandatory and it has to be common thing, and then you can collect it. That's like shor b'shor or shor ba'adam. When the shor is damaged, that's common. When an adam is damaged, that's not so common. And the Gemara asks a question. Hooray, now in the first wide line, Hooray boishes upagam, the shchiach, na bit shlichusayu. Boishes and pagam are two different payments. Boishes, we know what boishes. Boishes is embarrassment, which applies in any case when someone embarrasses their fellow. Upagam, Rashi speaks out specifically talking about the payment that you make to an oinus umafata, which is like a kind of a rape, where somebody raped a basula, a virgin, and ended up making a ba'ula. He caused also somewhat of a devaluation in price. Rashi, that also you evaluate that by looking at how much a slave woman would be sold on the marketplace, whether or not she was a basula, and the difference to a ba'ula, and that also has some sort of value. This is besides for the knas that we mentioned above, I believe. There's a value of it's basically nezek. What the Gemara says pagam is referring to nezek of a basula. But these two payments the Gemara is asking, they are common to shliach. Now you should be able to do the shlichus of these things. Let's talk about boishas for a second. Boishas kinireh is a common thing to take place, unfortunately, and therefore the Gemara is asking why, out of these 5 things, we say you don't collect them in Bavel. Why do we not collect boishas? Boishas is, as we'll see in a second, boishas is not a knas. We'll see it now. Actually, boishas, Rashi says, is not a knas because it's not a fixed amount. As we spoke about before, fixed shloshim shel eved, as Reb Shlomo said, is a fixed amount. Doesn't matter whether the eved was worth more, whether the eved was worth less. It's a fixed amount. Knas normally are fixed amounts. They don't go exactly connected the nezek, like or sumafata. There's a fixed amount, and dalad vehei is a fixed amount of whatever times the amount you stole. So that you do boishis is not a fixed amount. Boishis is not a fixed amount. It's according to, as we saw, lefiyam mavayish about misbayish. However much the embarrassment was for a certain person, we evaluated that. So therefore, the Gemara is asking, these fulfill both conditions basically. They're mammon and they're also common. So why are we not collecting boishas upagam in Bavel? The Gemara says, Omri hachanami. Actually, we do. The Gemara wants to first of all suggest that we do boishas al kaponim. We do collect because the Gemara brings the Rav Papa. The Gemara brings a story or Maisa. The Rav Papa agve arba meyazuze leboishas. He collected 400 zuz for boishas. Maisa Shahoya, Maisa Rav. He collected it, and Rav Papa is wasn't a Dayanim Smuchim. It wasn't a Dayanim Smuchim. He was in Bavel, and he still collected the money. So you see that we actually do shlichus of boishas. The Gemara wants to say we do shlichus of boishas because it fulfills both conditions. It's also money and it's also shkia. The Gemara says v'ha leisa of the Rav Papa. We don't pass him like Rav Papa. We don't agree with what Rav Papa did over there. The Gemara says that's not correct. As we see from another story, the Shalach Le Rav Chisda, Le Rav Nachman. The Shalach Le, this is the Gemara actually, you had it above on Daf Chav Zayin and Perak HaManiach. If I'm not mistaken, the Gemara there is discussing different types of boishas. If a person hits their fellow either with a shoe or with different objects or he slaps him, how much you pay, how much is the embarrassment in different kind of cases. And Rav Chisda had a question how much to collect, and he asked Rav Nachman, do you collect this much, do you collect that much? And they sent back to Rav Chisda, what are you asking? Chisda, knasa kamagvis bavel. You're collecting a knas in Bavel, you're collecting boishes. Now don't jump, because boishes we just said is not a knas actually. So Tosfos over here and over there point out that it doesn't mean davka knas. It means it's like a knas because it hasn't got a chisar and kisses. We'll see 1 second in the Gemara, but the Gemara is lav davka knas. But the Gemara is saying, Rav Chisda, we do not collect boishes in Bavel. We do not collect boishes in Bavel. So the Gemara wants to say that Rav Papa, we don't agree with Rav Papa. Rav Papa collected boishes, but the Gemara doesn't agree with him. And we shouldn't really be collecting boishes. But the Gemara's really had a question was why not? Really, boishes seems to fulfill the conditions of mammon, and it seems to fulfill the conditions of shchiach. So why are we not collecting it? So the Gemara adds in a third and final condition as follows. Excuse me. Elaki avdin and shlichusayu. The milsa the shchicha the is bei chisorim kis. This is the maskonos HaGemara. When do we do shlichus? When the Gemara speaks out 2 of them, when it's shchiach, when it's common, as we spoke about before, and when there is chisorim kis. Chisorim kis means there's financial loss to the damaged party. For example, you tore their shirt, or you caused them somewhat of their assets have gone down, their property or their own value. That's called chisorim kis. Whereas boishes is a thing that has not got chisorim kis. You embarrass somebody, it's not nice and it's wrong and it's not fair, and you'll pay for it. But it's not necessarily called that you've caused them a financial loss. Their bank account still says the same amount of money in it. You haven't affected their nechosim or their property. So that's called it hasn't got chisaron kis. And that's the final condition in order to say that the Dayanim in Bavel do the shlichus, even though they're not smuchim, because there has to be shlicha with chisaron kis. Now the Gemara doesn't say explicitly it has to be also mammon and not knas. I think that's a dispute and machlokes in the Rishonim, but I believe that the Rosh says that we need that condition as well. That condition that the Gemara mentioned above, the Gemara doesn't fall off that condition. We still need the condition of Mammon, but there's two extra conditions on top of being Mammon and not Knas. It has to be common and it has to have Chisar and Kiss. And the Gemara speaks out about Milsa, the Shricha, the Leis Bei Chisar and Kiss. If you would have a thing which is common, but is not Chisar and Kiss, that's, for example, we just said Boishes. Boishes is common without Chisar and Kiss. That you don't do. Inami, alternatively, Milsa de Loi Shricha, a thing which is not common, the is Bei Chisar and Kiss, but it has got a Chisar and Kiss. In other words, you're missing one of these two conditions. You're either missing the condition that it's common, or you're missing the condition that it's Chisar and Kiss. Loi Avdinan Shlichusai. We do not do the Shlichus of Dayanim in Bavel. Do not do the Shlichus if you're missing one of these two conditions. And that is that. Yeah, we'll take questions here.
Because then you could assume that anybody would understand what to do with it, and it's common. Why must it be peace? The same question. Why is it not involved as a lack of common?
I don't think, no, it sounds like it's a separate reason from not being common. I haven't done a fully survey with the Rishonim. I would just make a guess to say about Chisar and Kiss. I would think it's less necessary in order to do the. It's a big chiddush, obviously, to do shlichus and say that we're makel and allow the Dayanim Smuchim to do it. I would venture to say that by leis by Chisar and Kiss, the person's not financially missing anything. The Chacham didn't see it necessary to apply the principle of shlichus in order to get it back. We wanted it majorly in halvois vahidois. We wanted to stop the loans, but maybe in a thing that happened with Chisar and Kiss was less necessary to get it back because the person not suffering a financial loss. And perhaps al derech zeh by Knas also, where because Knas we said isn't exactly connected the nezek that you did. Knas is almost normally it's over and above what you did, and it's a penalty. Maybe that was also somewhat not necessary to use shlichus, but I'm saying that not fully with full confidence. Just okay. So the Gemara wants to say as follows. That's the maskana right now. Maskana is it needs to be a mandatory payment with the two conditions of shchiach and chisar and kiss. And now the Gemara says hilkach. Therefore, what's the bottom line going on over here? Adam ba'adam. If a person is damaged by another person, afal gav the isbei chisar and kiss. That would fall into the category. You have one tick in the box of chisar and kiss. It is when a person damages his friend, he's caused the financial loss. So there is chisar and kiss. However, kevan de lo shchicha loy avdinan shlichusayu. We do not do the shlichus. And that's the maskana why Rava, in this case of the child that was bit off his arm, that his arm was bit off by the shore. By the shore, we do not collect the money because even though it's a chisar and kiss, but that's actually Adam b'shor. But I think it's the same thing. We do not do the shlichus. However, in the other example, boishes, aval gav the shchicha, even though boishes is shchicha, kevan deleis v'chisar and kiss loy abdinan shlichusai. We do not do shlichus of boishes. However, fine. That's the maskana over here, and therefore these type of things we do not do shlichus, but other things that we do. Whereas shor b'shor, which we said on above, that fulfills all the conditions. When the shor damages the shor, it's a mandatory payment, as we'll see in a second about shor tam. If anyone was thinking, but we'll see in a second. It's a mandatory payment, and it's also common, and it's also chisar and kiss. So all those three things you collect in Bavel. Now the Gemara says. And a question on even that. The shor b'shor goyim b'bavel. Is that really true that we're left with the maskana that with the shor you collect in Bavel? V'ha Omar Rava. Rava's our big rabbi in this sugya. Rava himself said, shor shehizik ein goyim oisoi b'bavel. Rava said another thing about Bavel, that a shor that damages, that we do not collect the damages in Bavel. So that seems to be quite a big steer. We do not say that a shor whose damage can collect. We say you cannot collect. The Gemara dissects what was Rava saying when he said shor shehizik ein goyim oisei b'bavel. The azik man. Which kind of shor? We know there's different kinds of shor, different kinds of niziks. Who did the shor mazik? Ilema the azik adam. If the shor damaged a person, then the Gemara asks, my area shor the azik adam. Afilu adam the azik adam. Nami ein goyim oisei b'bavel. If the person is the victim of the damage, then it doesn't matter whether a shor damaged him or Adam damaged him. We said above the print when the Adam gets damaged, it's not collected in Bavel. So that wouldn't fit very good in with the statement of Rava. The statement of Rava was Shor shehizik ein goven oisei b'bavel. He stressed the shore did the damage. If the shore was damaging a person, he wouldn't need to stress the shore was doing the damage. The reason why it's not collected is because a person who is damaged, you do not collect that money, as we spoke about before. It's not shchiach. So what's Rava saying? Elepshita the azik shore. Rava must be speaking about the fact that a shore was mazik another shore. So you see, Bakatani ein goven oisei b'bavel. This is the end of the kasha. You see that Rava clearly said that a shore that was mazik another shore, you do not collect it in bavel. How does that fit with the first half of the sugya that we said when the shore damages another shore, you do collect it in bavel? That's the question. Says the Gemara, Amri Hassam Batam Acha Bamuad. Shore Tam and Shore Muad. We know first 3 times the shore is Negeach, he pays Chatzi Nezek. That's called a shore Tam. On the 3rd time after 3 warnings, he becomes a Muad and he pays full Nezek. So besides the difference of half and a full Nezek, there's a difference between the whether it's a knas or mammon. It was actually a machloikas above in the end of the first parak, whether a short time is a palganiska, half nezek is a knas or is it mammon. But we paskined over there that it is knas, palganiska knasa. And if you correct, I'm remembering as I speak, if I'm not mistaken, the Gemara over there says now that chatzi nezek is a knas, we do not collect it in bavel. Because as we just said, and then the makor hatzvam is asked to go over here. The Asugi comes out with the principle that you do not collect knas in bavel. So therefore, shor tam is a knas. So that's why you do not collect it in bavel. So when Rava said shor shehizik ein goven oisei bavel, he was referring to a shor tam. And the shor tam you cannot collect in bavel because it's a knas. Says the Gemara hacha b'muad. Whereas when the first half of the sugya, where we said if a shore is damaged by another shore and you do collect it, that's referring to a shor muad. And the shor muad is collected in bavel because that is a payment of mammon. That's a full payment, not a half a payment, not a double payment. It's a full payment exactly connected and in correspondence to the amount of nezek that you did. That's a mandatory payment, and that you collect in bavel. Then the Gemara asks now another question. For ha'amar Rava, another statement of Rava, ein muad b'bavel. There's no such thing as a shor muad in bavel. You cannot make a shor muad in bavel. The reason is because Rashi says, since a shor tam is a knas and a payment of knas, so you're never going to bring the shor to Bezdin because you can't judge the shor because it's a knas payment. And in order to make a shor muad, you have to judge him 3 times on the nekichas that he did. And if you're not bringing him into Bezdin, how can you make him into a muad? So basically, how can you say that the shor that is mazik another shor? You're paying because it's a shor muad. There's no muad in bavel either. So the Gemara says, Amri de'iyayid hasam v'aisua lahacha. The shor was made a muad in Eretz Yisrael, where there are Dayanim Smuchim, and you can dan dinei knossos, you can do a knas, you can pay chayiv chatzi nezek, you bring the shor in 3 times, you make him into a muad, and the shor took a long stroll and ended up in bavel, or laptap bavel in Chutz LaAretz. Such a shor is a shor muad, and if he damages, he's going to have a payment of mammon, and therefore he will be paying in bavel, even because he is a shor muad. Then the Gemara says, we've got another couple of minutes to finish off. That's a very uncommon case. To have a shor muad in Eretz Yisrael, and then he traveled into bavel, and then he's going to be chayiv over there. That's not a common case, and we said above that non-common cases, we do not do the shlichus of the dayanim in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, if you're not a dayan samuch, you cannot judge this case because it's a very not shchiach case. Says the Gemara, the asu rabbanon dahasam v'yedu ahacha. Okay, so we have another kind of case that the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael came into Bavel and they judged the case over there, and they are Dayanim Smuchim, and they've got the right to judge the case. But the Gemara says it's the same problem. Soif milsa to shchichi. You said a thing that's not common, you don't do shlichus. So whether or not the shor traveled or the dayanim traveled, it's also not shliach. In such a case, you can't judge in bavel. So the maskana of Gemara is elaki ka'amarava b'shein v'regel. The whole sugi we learned above, which said a shor which damages the shor, you do collect it in bavel, and it fulfills all the conditions of being a mandatory payment, and it's common, it's shliach, and it's also chisar and kiss. That's not talking about a shor which was noigeach, goring shor, which was keren. We're talking about shein v'regel. Shein v'regel means the behemoth eats either tvua of somebody else, or he tramples on somebody else. So, or he scratches his back for hana on another animal and damages the other animal. These kind of hezekas of shein v'regel, and they are muad mitchilasan. They pay nezik shalem from the beginning. There's no chatzi nezik, there's no tam, there's no muad. That's moment to start off with. In that case, you can judge in bubble from the beginning, and that's shchiach. And therefore, that is the maskonos hagemara, that for those kind of cases you can judge. Yeah, Boris got a question. I'll just end off here.
What do we do